it's been quite a while since the 90s that we've had a House Speaker visiting Taiwan. Do you think this has any relation to the shift in geopolitics that's been spurred on by Ukraine, the war in Ukraine? What do you think the U.S. is planning there? Why is she going there?
Well, I don't think the U.S. is planning anything. I think Pelosi's visit is a byproduct of the ineptitude and chaos that exists in Washington, D.C. We know for a fact the president didn't want her to go. We know that the Defense Department said this is not a good time to be doing this. We know that the State Department didn't brief her on talking, which normally when a congressional delegation goes abroad, it's being done to A, review policy, and B, further policy. And so the participants in a congressional delegation will coordinate closely with the State Department to make sure that their talking points are all on the same page, that they're furthering the stated policy goals of declared U.S. policy. Nancy Pelosi did none of this. This was purely a rogue operation by a rogue individual. I mean, this is a woman who, according to people in her entourage, this was about as narcissistic an event as one could imagine. Purely hubris-driven, ego-driven. This is about Nancy Pelosi cementing her place in history. She wanted to go to Taiwan to be seen as being tough, to make a bold statement about, America's commitment. Well, newsflash, Nancy, read the Constitution. You don't get to make those statements. The president does. You get to, you're the Speaker of the House. Of course, your House of Representatives gets to hold hearings. They get to call people in, ask them questions. They can advise. They can make statements on what they want. They have control of the budget. They can insert money into the budget for projects. But other than that, you're not a player. The president gives you the courtesy of, coming to you as part of what they call the Gang of Eight, the 8 most important people in the House of Representatives and the Senate on critical national security issues. The president is required under certain intelligence provisions and when it deals with military matters to notify Congress. The president notifies Congress. The president does not ask Congress for its permission. The president doesn't turn to Congress and say, hey, what do you think? Should I do X? The president says, I have done X, or I am getting ready to do X. I'm notifying you. What do you think about that? So Nancy, what she hasn't furthered U.S. policy, except you could say that she's further muddled already chaotic U.S. policy. The U.S. doesn't have a sound, firm policy on Taiwan. We have, the 1979 Taiwan Act, which commits us to a one China policy. Imagine that. We are committed to a one China policy. That means that no matter how you interpret it, Taiwan is part of China.
Right.
That's the policy. So the idea of Nancy flying to Taiwan and making the kind of statements, first of all, why is the Taiwanese president receiving her? She's not an executive.
Yeah, that's weird.
She should have been met by the head of the Taiwanese parliament, and this should have been a purely parliamentarian exchange. Instead, she's being treated as the head of state. She is not. She has no decision-making authority. The president should have instructed the Department of Defense to deny her access to a military aircraft, and that would have shut this trip down. But he didn't, and it shows the absolute weakness of the Biden administration when it comes to China. Why didn't he shut Pelosi down? Because he didn't want to be seen as weak. Mm-hmm. But Nancy Pelosi did nothing but show him as weak. By going over there, making statements, she's now put China in an impossible situation where China is bound by its constitution. A 2005 amendment to the Constitution requires China to act in a non-peaceful manner if Taiwan makes any movement toward independence. And if you listen to what Nancy said and how the Taiwanese received her, this is purely about shifting away from one China to two Chinas, Taiwan as an independent entity. And that is a precursor for war. So that's the trajectory we're headed on right now. Ultimately, it's China's decision. China makes China policy. But the United States is in a position right now where it has basically removed itself from the equation. China doesn't care what the United States thinks anymore, even if the United States had something worthy of contemplation. Mm-hmm. China has spent the last several months calling up every senior decision maker in the United States and telling them flat out to shut up. That every time you open your mouth, you damage U.S.-Chinese relations and you make conflict with Taiwan all but inevitable. They told that to Jake Sullivan. They told that to Antony Blinken. They told that to Lloyd Austin. And Xi Jinping just told that to Joe Biden. When you play with fire, you will be burned. Well, I hope Biden's got his fire gloves on right now because things are getting hot.
You know, that's very insightful, the things you added about Nancy. So, I mean, you believe she's basically acting outside the parameters, not just of her constitutional duty, but what the Biden administration wants her to do, but Biden's just too weak to shut it down. And, of course, that puts China in a difficult position. A lot of people have been not surprised, but they've been railing about, oh, China's doing military exercises around Taiwan and China's being aggressive. Is China being aggressive?
Taiwan is China. So how can you be aggressive against your own territory? That's like the United States holding military exercises on Texas and people saying, oh my God, the U.S. is being aggressive towards Texas. No, from the Chinese perspective, Taiwan is China. Right. China has been very tolerant of the political realities that are that come with the issue of Taiwan. They understand the history better than most Americans, maybe better than all Americans. And they also understand the reality that the best thing for China, for Taiwan, and the world is the peaceful reunification of Taiwan with China. And I think the Chinese have a name for it, one nation, two systems, or something of that nature. I mean, the bottom line is, what the Chinese are basically saying is take down your flag, put up our flag, and nothing will change. I mean, that's just the reality. This is, China's willing to let Taiwan operate in an extremely autonomous fashion. I do believe that their military would have to be absorbed into the Chinese, Ministry of Defense, and this American equipment would be phased out. Chinese equipment would be phased in, but that's just natural. Because there's no reason for Taiwan as part of China to be receiving American military goods. But the day-to-day functioning, the parliament would remain the parliament. Taiwan would be sort of a self-governing, autonomous entity. And I don't see China, moving to change that. It's not like Hong Kong, which has immediate connectivity, physical connectivity with China. Taiwan is separated by the Taiwan Strait. So things that happen in Taiwan can be contained in Taiwan. There's not as much pressure on China to go in and stifle free speech, stifle democracy, et cetera. So, any wise person would understand that is the best option for all parties involved. China believes so too. But China's in an impossible situation. Nancy Pelosi has created a narrative that has set in motion the forces of Taiwanese independence. And China, recognizes that if it doesn't stop this momentum, reverse this momentum, then it will be compelled to go to war against. I mean, do you go to war against? I guess it'd be a civil war. They don't have to. The beauty is, the United Nations can't accuse them of violating international humanitarian law because they're not declaring war against a sovereign state. They're dealing with an internal domestic political problem that will have global ramifications. But I think these military exercises are a signal to Taiwan and the world that China has the ability to end the Taiwanese experiment in democracy. Anytime it sees fit. The thing, and I think that this is also a message of deterrence to the West, to the United States, and to others, that China's not playing games. Now, the thing about deterrence, in order for it to be real, to be viable, it has to be believable. which means that these exercises aren't simply a demonstration. It is literal muscle flexing. China's climbed into the ring, and right now they're shadow boxing, but they're ready to hit that bell and start throwing punches for real anytime anyone wants to. That's the thing about real deterrence, is that it's backed up by genuine capability and the intent to see it through. I don't think China's bluffing. I don't think China bluffs. They are very reticent to go to war. I think China will look for any possibility to avoid conflict. But if the United States and Taiwan and indeed the rest of the world continue to behave in the way they're behaving, I don't think China will have any choice but to go to war. Their constitution requires it.